Hello and welcome to this Span Arts online workshop. My name's Nia Lewis, I'm a textile designer, and here I'll show you how to design and make these woven patches for your mending and decorative projects. Here's what you'll need to get started. I've got some masking tape and some double-sided tape, some drawing materials and a couple of pairs of scissors. Also some needles with large eyes depending on the texture of your thread. I've got some cardboard, this is just a cereal packet, but some mount board would also be great. It needs to have a white background. I've also got a range of yarns and threads. Some of them have got lots of lovely texture and some are smooth and strong. It just depends on what your project needs are. I'm going to use a yarn wrap to plan and design the patch. You can see here that the same colourway has been used in 4 different proportions of stripes, producing very different results. I'm going to start off with one piece of card that's got some double-sided sticky tape on the front. I'm going to take the first colour and attach it using the masking tape to the back. Very carefully I'm going to wrap around the card and keep it nice and even, don't pull it too tight, and make sure that all of the threads are close together in the rows. I've done 7 rows of blue followed by 5 rows of the pink, and I'm going to repeat that across the whole length of the yarn wrap. Obviously there are so many different options you've got here. You can add in different colours and different textures, and your stripes can be all sorts of different thicknesses. It's really up to you. I'm going to keep on going all the way to the end. You can see that the back of the yarn wrap isn't necessarily going to look very pretty, but it just needs to be very nice and secure. And when I come to the end, I've just trimmed off the pink and then trim the blue, and I'm just going to put one piece of masking tape all along the back just to secure it, and then trim the ends away. You can experiment with lots of different options, but for now we've got our plan, we've got our design, and we're going to make the loom. I've got a piece of 8 by 6 centimetre card here. I've marked every half centimetre across the width, and there's also a line at the top and the bottom half a centimetre in. I'm now snipping down to that line on both the top and the bottom. I'm going to choose quite a stiff cotton for the warp on this one. I'm leaving a nice long end and taping it down. Again, you've got to watch out for the tension on the loom, otherwise you end up with something that looks more like a bow from a bow and arrow. It's really important that you wind this correctly, otherwise you won't be able to get the patch off the loom at the end. So you just need to go behind the notches all the way along. You can see it there. And also at the other end, leave a nice long string and tape it down. You can make your loom whatever size you like, and changing the distance between the notches will change the appearance of your weave. We're going to do a plain weave structure on this patch. This means that I'm going to thread the coloured yarn over, under across the whole width of the loom. When I go back, I'm going to do the opposite. So where I went under, I now go over, and where I went over, I now go under. You can see that I'm turning around to do the 3rd row and catching that loose end in to try and secure it. There are lots of ways of doing this, and we'll look at some other ways as we go along. You can see I'm pushing the threads down to make a nice compact fabric as I go. Going to do 7 rows of blue because that's what I did on the yarn wrap, followed by 5 rows of pink, and I'm going to continue that across the whole distance. As I'm weaving across the warp threads, I'm making sure that I don't pull the coloured thread too tightly, otherwise we end up with something that looks like a hourglass. I'm introducing the second colour, but from the other side, which means that I'm going to end up with some nice balanced long edges, which are the salvages, that one won't be bulkier than the other. So I'm now going to catch those threads as I go along again and do my 5 rows before I revert back to the blue. I've kept the blue and the pink will stay threaded onto the needles even when they're not being woven with. Here you can see I've left the pink on the needle, and I've actually just threaded it up the selvage, which gives us a nice invisible transition along the side between the two stripes. Again, every now and then I'm pushing the weft threads down to make a nice tight fabric. So you can see now I've woven to the end of the loom, or just about. There's still a few more rows that we can squeeze in. Even when it looks as if you're right at the very end, push the weft threads down to make your fabric slightly more compact, and you'll still be able to squeeze in another row. The reason for doing this is that when you take the patch off the loom, you'll see there's a bit of extra warp capacity at both ends, and if your fabric is nice and compact, you can spread it out to fill that capacity. You can see that there are still some loose ends on either side. Those can be woven in when we finished now, or we can weave them in after it comes off the loom. And that's just a matter of sewing them back through. Depends on what you're going to use your patch for, really, about how tight, whether you need it to be tidy on both sides or whether one side is going to be hidden, and then you can afford to kind of thread your loose ends in at the back. When you can't squeeze any more rows in, you're ready to take your patch off the loom. You do this by gently easing down the tabs at the top and then pulling it away very carefully. You can undo the tape at the back now, remembering that until those warp ends are sewn back through the fabric, it's not completely secure. You can pull the weft threads out now just to take up that extra capacity at both the top and the bottom. And we just need to weave the loose ends in. You can do that by sewing them into the selvage, or just sew them back to the back here quite invisibly like I've done there. Once you've mastered the basic rectangle, you might want to try some different shapes. Here we're looking at a circle. The loom is made in exactly the same way, with 0.5 centimetre gaps between the warp threads. I've just put 2 additional notches on the edge to prevent it looking more like an oval shape when it's finished. You might find that a distance of less than 0.5 centimetres gives you smoother edges. It's really a matter of just having a play and experimenting. You can see that the warping up is done in exactly the same way. When you're ready to start weaving, it's a good idea to start at the top over 3 warp threads. Do a couple of rows on just 3, and as you start doing more and more rows, start incorporating more and more of the warp threads in, and this will give you a nice smooth circle edge. Again, I'm catching the loose end as I go. And I'm just doing a plain weave structure here. Again, you can vary this as much as you like, where the plain weave is over 1, under 1. You could experiment with going under 2, over 2, and all sorts of different variations. The possibilities are endless. So I'm just snipping off that loose end now. It'll be less tidying up to do at the end. So you keep on weaving, change the colours when you want, change your structures when you want, keep on pushing it down to make a nice tight fabric all the way to the end, and then you take it off in the same way that you did for the rectangle. You might design your patches with a specific project in mind. Alternatively, you might use this process to use up some odds and ends of yarn you've got lying around. However you choose to adapt this process is completely up to you. You'll have fun experimenting. Change the size of the loom, the shape of the loom, the kinds of yarn you're using, mix thick threads with thin threads, and think about how you can apply it to your mending projects for fashion and interiors. Here's an example of how I've used one of my woven patches to mend a hole in some jeans. I've also added some really colourful running stitch. I hope you've enjoyed the workshop. Thank you very much. Diolch.